My name is Jane L. Summers, and I am 31 years old. I got engaged 6 months ago after 2 years together, and up until last month, I thought things were fine. Not perfect, but solid. Michael and I live separately, but he spent most nights at my place. We talked about wedding plans, guest lists, timelines, all the normal things. Then he started getting strange, critical in ways that felt random at first. Why didn't I have bigger career goals? Why did I like quiet Sundays, watching football with my brother? Why didn't I want to try trendier restaurants or spontaneous weekend trips? I'm an accountant making $85,000 a year. Stable, predictable, comfortable. I thought that was a good thing. Michael suggested couples counseling. Preventative maintenance, he called it. Let's work on communication before the wedding. The timing felt off, but I agreed. I'm not too proud to try. He booked a therapist his best friend raved about. $200 a session, but whatever. We walked into the office together, leather couches, neutral art, tissue boxes everywhere. Dr. Reynolds was mid-50s, calm voice, notepad ready. She asked the standard opening question, "What brings you both in today?" Michael didn't hesitate. He launched straight in. He said he loved me, then immediately followed it with how bored he was. He said my life was just work, sports, video games with my brother, every weekend the same routine. He said I'd been an accountant at the same firm for 5 years with no ambition to move up, no interest in travel, nothing exciting. I sat there quietly and let him talk. Dr. Reynolds nodded like this was normal and asked him to explain more. Michael leaned back and said he needed to be honest. He said he only proposed because he's 34 and running out of time. The room went silent. He started talking about his biological clock in a different way, about pressure from his mom, about Instagram feeds full of babies and weddings. He said he couldn't wait forever for some perfect, exciting woman to show up. I was stable, made decent money, wouldn't cheat. At his age, he said, that's what matters. Dr. Reynolds asked if he felt like he settled. Michael shrugged and said yes, kind of. He said he wasn't getting any younger, that his mom wanted grandkids, that the wedding was already planned. Venue booked, photographer hired, suit ordered. What was he supposed to do? Cancel everything and be single at 35? He sighed and looked at me on an imaginary couch. Said sometimes he watched me relaxing at home and wondered if this was really his whole life. But what choice did he have? He didn't have time to start over and find someone better. Dr. Reynolds finally turned to me and asked how hearing all of that made me feel. I stood up. I said I'd like to end the session and the engagement. Michael spun toward me, confused, asking what I was doing. I told him he'd just spent 10 minutes explaining to a stranger that he proposed to me out of desperation, that he found me boring, and that he settled because he was afraid of being alone at 35. I asked him why I would marry someone who felt that way. He said he was just being honest, that therapy was for honesty. I told him I was being honest too, that we were done. I grabbed my jacket and headed for the door. He stood up, voice rising, saying I couldn't just leave in the middle of a session. I told him the session was over and so were we. He accused me of shutting down when things got hard. I turned around and told him I wasn't shutting down, I was listening. I told him he'd made it clear I was a backup plan for his fear of aging, and I finally understood who I was engaged to. Dr. Reynolds tried to intervene, suggesting we take a breath. I said no thanks and walked out. I drove home, sat on my couch, the boring couch where I watch boring football, and stared at the wall for 20 minutes. My phone started buzzing immediately. Texts, calls, voicemails. I silenced it all. I called my brother and told him the engagement was over. He was quiet for a moment, then said I dodged something much worse than a breakup. He was right. I just didn't know yet how far this was going to go. By the time I got back to my apartment, the adrenaline had drained out of me and left something colder behind. Michael followed a few minutes later. I heard his key in the lock around 11, the same casual confidence he always used, like nothing fundamental had changed. I was sitting on the couch when he came in, jacket still on, lights low, TV off. He took one look at my face and knew this wasn't a conversation he could charm his way through. "We need to talk," he said, voice already sliding into damage control. "There's nothing to talk about," I said. "Yes, there is," he insisted, pacing. "You can't just end a 2-year relationship over one comment." "It wasn't a comment," I said. "It was a confession." He sighed dramatically, rubbing his face. I was venting. Therapy is a safe space. I was being honest about my feelings. "Great," I said. "Now I'm being honest about mine." He sat down beside me like muscle memory kicked in. I shifted away. His eyes flicked to that movement, irritation flashing before he masked it. "You're blowing this out of proportion," he said. "You know I love you." "No," I said quietly. "You love the idea of being married before your timeline runs out. I just happened to be here." That's not fair," he snapped. "I never said that." "You said you proposed because you're 34 and afraid of being alone," I replied. "You said I'm boring. You said you settled. Which part am I misremembering?" He opened his mouth, closed it, then tried a different angle. "I was under pressure. My mom keeps asking about grandkids. All my friends are married. You know how that feels." "I do," I said, "and I still wouldn't marry someone out of fear." He leaned forward, voice softer now. "I do want to marry you. I just said it badly." "You said it accurately," I said, "and I'm not signing up for a life where I wonder every argument if you're thinking, this is what I settled for." He stood up abruptly. "So that's it, you're just done?" "Yes." This is insane," he said. "You're acting like we don't live together." "We don't," I replied. "You sleep here sometimes. There's a difference." "That's ridiculous," he said. "I have clothes here. My toothbrush is in your bathroom. This is my home too." "It isn't," I said, standing up. "Your name isn't on the lease. You don't pay rent. You contribute a few $100s a month for groceries. This is my apartment." He stared at me like he was seeing a stranger. "You're being so cold right now. This isn't like you." "What did you expect?" I asked. "That I'd pretend you didn't say all that and marry you anyway?" Silence filled the room. Heavy, uncomfortable, undeniable. Finally, he fumbled with his keys. "You're really doing this?" "Yes." He hesitated, then tossed the key at me. It bounced off my chest and clattered onto the floor. "Fine," he said. "You want to throw everything away over nothing. Go ahead. But don't come crying to me when you realize you made a huge mistake." I bent down, picked up the key, and set it on the counter. "Good night," I said. He stormed out, slamming the door hard enough that I heard my neighbor shift upstairs. I locked it behind him and stood there for a long moment, hand still on the deadbolt, breathing through the tremor in my chest. My phone rang almost immediately. His name lit up the screen. I didn't answer. The voicemail from his mother came through an hour later. I listened to it the next morning. She told me I needed to fix this, that her son was devastated, that adults don't walk out of therapy sessions when things get uncomfortable. I deleted it without calling back. At work the next day, I couldn't focus. Numbers blurred. My phone kept buzzing with texts from Michael, from his friends, from people who had clearly heard a version of the story that skipped a few critical sentences. Around noon, his best friend called. I answered on the third ring. "She says you freaked out in therapy and just left," she said. "Did she tell you what he said?" I asked. There was a pause. "He said he had concerns about the relationship." "He told the therapist he proposed because he's afraid of being alone at 35, I said. "He said I'm boring. He said he settled." Silence. "He didn't tell me that part," she finally said. "Yeah," I said. "Figures." By the time I got home that evening, I'd already made another decision. I called a locksmith, explained the situation briefly, and scheduled a change for the next afternoon. $180, worth every cent. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. Not because it didn't hurt, but because it was over. The locksmith came the next afternoon, right on time. I watched from the couch as he replaced the deadbolt and the knob, the sound of metal clicking into place feeling more final than anything I'd said out loud. When he handed me the new keys, he smiled politely and said, "X situation?" I nodded. He said, "Happens more than you'd think," and left. When the door shut behind him, I realized Michael no longer had access to my space, physically or emotionally, and that mattered more than I expected. I spent the rest of the evening packing his things. Clothes he'd slowly migrated into my closet. Shoes by the door, chargers, toiletries, books. The engagement planning binder sat on the coffee table for a moment before I shoved it into a box without opening it. I didn't want to reread timelines and color palettes for a future that was never real. By the time I was done, the boxes were stacked neatly by the door, labeled impersonal, ready to be removed like evidence. That night, my phone lit up again. Michael's mother tried calling twice. I didn't answer. His best friend texted asking if we could all just sit down and talk like adults. I replied once, clearly. "Your friend said he settled for me because he's afraid of being alone. There's nothing to talk about." After that, I stopped responding. The narrative shifted quickly, and not in my favor at first. Michael told people I abandoned him during a vulnerable therapy session. He said I shut down when things got hard. He said he was just being honest and I panicked. It spread fast, that version of events, because it was cleaner than the truth. People like clean stories. They don't like hearing that someone admitted they settled and got called on it. At a weekend barbecue, a mutual friend pulled me aside. He said Michael told him I walked out of counseling for no reason. I looked him straight in the eye and told him exactly what Michael said, word for word. I didn't dramatize it. I didn't editorialize. I just repeated it. His face changed immediately. He muttered something under his breath and said he didn't blame me. That conversation repeated itself with different people over the next few days. Each time, the reaction was the same. Shock, then understanding, then quiet backing away from Michael. His mother escalated. She left another voicemail, this one sharper, accusing me of humiliating her son, of destroying his reputation, of wasting wedding deposits. I deleted it without listening all the way through. I didn't owe her an explanation for her son's words. His best friend tried once more, calling to say Michael was under pressure, that he didn't mean it like it sounded. I asked her if she'd marry someone who said that about her. She didn't answer. By Friday, I texted Michael one last time, not to reconcile, but to set logistics. Your things are packed. Pick them up Saturday between 10 and 12. Bring one person. No drama. He responded immediately, furious, accusing me of being cruel. I replied with one word, confirm. He did. Saturday morning came too fast. At 10:02, the doorbell rang. When I opened it, Michael stood there with his mother and his best friend, an entourage. His mother tried to push past me, saying we needed to talk. I blocked the doorway calmly and gestured to the boxes. Your stuff is here, let's load it up. She accused me of throwing away a relationship over one comment. I corrected her. Over a confession. Michael stood behind them, eyes red, jaw tight. His best friend tried to reason with me, saying he'd been scared, that people say things they don't mean when they're afraid. I looked at Michael and asked him if he wanted to correct anything I'd been telling people. He didn't say a word. That silence told me everything. As they loaded the boxes, Michael finally spoke. He asked where the engagement ring was. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was predictable. I told him it was in my safe. He demanded it back. I told him no. When an engagement ends because one person admits they settled, the ring goes back to the buyer. His best friend started Googling. Her face fell. She told him quietly that I was right. Michael's mother called me petty. I told her her son proposed out of fear, not love, and I was entitled to keep the ring I bought for a relationship that didn't exist. Michael cried. I didn't comfort him. They finished loading the car and left, his mother hissing something about me ruining his life. I locked the door behind them and leaned against it, shaking, not from doubt, but from release. By Monday morning, I thought the worst was over. I was wrong. At work, I got called into HR. They'd received a complaint claiming I was harassing Michael, creating a hostile environment. I knew immediately where it came from. I calmly showed them my phone. The only messages to him were about picking up his belongings. No calls, no threats, no contact beyond logistics. The HR director nodded, unimpressed, and said it looked like a false report. My boss followed me out afterward and told me to document everything. That was when anger finally hit. Not explosive, but cold. He tried to mess with my job because I wouldn't marry him out of pity. That crossed a line. That evening, an envelope arrived. A poorly written demand letter asking for the ring, compensation for emotional distress, reimbursement for counseling. I sent photos of it to my cousin, a paralegal, who called me laughing. She told me it was garbage, a scare tactic, and I had nothing to worry about. I believed her. I decided I was done playing defense. When mutual friends asked what happened, I told the truth. Calmly. Consistently. The narrative shifted fast after that. People stopped calling me cold. They started calling me smart. Michael stopped being invited places. His version didn't survive contact with facts. 3 weeks after the breakup, my phone finally went quiet. No calls, no messages, no threats, just silence. For the first time since that therapy session, I felt like I could breathe. The silence didn't last long enough to get comfortable before the next wave hit. It came quietly, through paperwork and intimidation instead of shouting. Michael tried to take back control in the only way he had left, by turning the engagement into a transaction and hoping fear would do what guilt no longer could. 2 days after the HR meeting, I got another message from an unfamiliar number. It was short and smug, telling me Michael planned to take me to small claims court if I didn't return the engagement ring immediately. I didn't respond. An hour later, a letter arrived in the mail, printed on cheap letterhead, coffee stain on the corner, demanding the ring, reimbursement for therapy costs, and compensation for emotional distress. It read like something cobbled together from internet templates and entitlement. I sent photos of the letter to my cousin, who works in legal support. She called me within minutes, laughing. She told me the ring was mine, especially since the engagement ended, because Michael admitted he settled. She told me emotional distress over a breakup isn't something courts entertain. She told me to ignore it unless real paperwork showed up. It didn't. Instead, Michael escalated socially. He started telling people I stole from him. He framed the ring as something I owed him for supporting him through a hard time. Every version of the story painted him as the victim of a woman who couldn't handle honesty. I stayed consistent. I didn't argue. I repeated what he said in therapy and let people decide for themselves. It didn't take long. By the end of the week, mutual friends stopped asking me to reconcile. A few reached out to apologize for believing his version. His best friend sent one final message accusing me of ruining his reputation. I replied once. He did that himself. Then I blocked her. On Friday morning, I took the ring to the jeweler, the same man who remembered congratulating me 6 months earlier. He didn't ask questions. He inspected the ring, nodded, and offered me $3,400. I accepted without hesitation. Watching him place it in a small velvet tray felt like closing a door I should have closed sooner. I walked out lighter, cash in hand, future unburdened. Michael found out through mutual friends and texted from another new number, furious that I sold his ring. I replied once, wrong number. Then I blocked him again. That weekend, I booked a solo trip to the coast using the ring money. No grand plans, just quiet. A small rental, ocean air, long walks, books I'd been meaning to read. I told my brother. He said it was about time I did something for myself. He was right. Michael's mother left one last voicemail before I blocked her too. She accused me of destroying her son, of humiliating him, of canceling a wedding and wasting deposits. I deleted it halfway through. Her son destroyed the engagement the moment he called it a compromise. At a birthday party the following week, a friend asked me directly if I regretted leaving so quickly. I thought about it honestly, about the ring, the threats, the lies, the attempt to mess with my job. Then I shook my head, not for a second. The power struggle was over. I had stepped out of it completely. The only thing left was what came next. The week at the coast did something I didn't expect. It didn't distract me from what happened. It clarified it. I woke up early every morning to the sound of waves instead of my phone buzzing with demands. I walked the beach with coffee in my hand and realized how tense I'd been for months without naming it. The quiet wasn't empty. It was honest. I read. I slept. I let my thoughts arrive and leave without arguing with them. For the first time since the engagement, I didn't feel like I was racing a clock that wasn't even mine. When I came back, my life felt smaller in the best way. No wedding spreadsheets, no timelines, no conversations about what I should want by a certain age. I went back to work and focused on my projects. I stopped explaining my choices to people who were more comfortable with tradition than truth. The friends who mattered stayed. The ones who needed me to be agreeable drifted away. That told me everything. I heard about Michael through the same quiet channels as before. He moved back in with his parents. He canceled the venue and ate the deposits. He complained to friends that dating felt different now, that women asked questions he didn't like, that nobody wanted to rush into marriage just because he was anxious. Some people said he looked tired. Some said he seemed embarrassed. I didn't feel anything about it. Not relief, not satisfaction, just distance. A month later, I ran into him by accident at a grocery store. He was standing in the cereal aisle staring at the same box like he couldn't remember why he needed it. He saw me and froze. I nodded politely, the way you acknowledge a stranger you once knew well, and kept walking. He didn't follow me. He didn't speak. That moment told me, more than any apology ever could, he finally understood I wasn't part of his story anymore. I didn't rush into dating. I didn't need to. I liked my evenings. I liked my routine. I liked knowing that nobody was silently measuring my worth against their fears. When I did eventually say yes to a date, it wasn't because I was lonely. It was because I was curious. The man I met didn't ask me where I saw myself in 5 years. He asked what made me feel at peace. He didn't flinch when I said stability. He smiled and said that sounded good to him. Sometimes people ask if I think Michael loved me. I think he did, in the way someone loves a solution. I think he cared about me the way you care about something reliable when you're afraid of uncertainty. But love that comes from fear will always turn into resentment. I refuse to marry into that. I'm not boring. I'm grounded. I like my job. I like my home. I like Sundays with football and routines and knowing what to expect. If someone thinks that's dull, they're not my person. I don't need to perform excitement to be worthy of commitment. Looking back, I'm grateful he said it out loud. Grateful he admitted he settled. Grateful it happened in front of a therapist instead of 10 years into a marriage. He thought honesty would buy him patience. It bought him consequences. I didn't lose a fiancé. I avoided becoming someone's compromise. And that's not a breakup story. That's a rescue.